do is to give a big thank you to Technically Philly, as tonight's event is a part of Philly Tech Week 2019, presented by Comcast. We do have, as you see on your chair, some short surveys that is a part of Tech Week, and we'd love it if you fill them out before you leave tonight. If you would like to tweet about the event, please don't forget to include hashtag PTW 2019 and the World Affairs Council's Twitter handle at WACPhila. Tonight, we are here to discuss entrepreneurship, a new wave, a new generation of entrepreneurship in Philadelphia. Now more than ever, the future of Philadelphia clearly depends on small businesses and startups. And many of the industry leaders are emerging, young, creative, and passionate folks about finding ways to address problems, both big and small. Problems not only with respect to the specifics of what their businesses may be designed to serve, but also broader problems in the community. Many of these entrepreneurs come from all over the world and bring their talent and energy with them to Philadelphia, and a determination to invest in Philadelphia's communities in a variety of ways. The great group of panelists that we have this evening will be introduced, and the panel will be moderated by Keenan Corrigan. Keenan is Director of Fellow and Alumni Experience at Venture for America. And Venture is an organization that prepares college graduates, recent college graduates, for careers as entrepreneurs. We're excited to have her with us this evening. We thank her for being here.
Oregon, and I work for Venture for America. VFA is a fellowship program for recent college grads who want to learn how to build businesses and become entrepreneurs. And we focus on 14 American cities, Philadelphia being one of them. But today I'm excited because we're expanding that a little bit further and taking into consideration a more global perspective when it comes to entrepreneurship. So before we jump into this session, I'd love to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. So you'll each have about 2 minutes to introduce yourself to the crowd and tell your story a little bit. Who'd like to start?
I'm not always going to start first.
No,
Just want to caveat. Okay.
We'll switch it up.
All right. So, for my personal background, people say I have an interesting story. I'm a refugee with Burning Gulf War. In 1990, my parents took a trip to Philadelphia. They ended up having my baby brother here. A few weeks after they came back to Kuwait, Saddam invaded the country for its oil. And it was a few weeks after that we were huddled in a bomb shelter when all of a sudden 2 men burst in looking for him. They were there to take all American citizens out of the country for their safety. And they came to us, told us we had an hour to pack 2 bags, put us on a plane, and brought us to Philly almost 29 years ago. On September 21st, it'll be 29 years. When I was 15, even though the government brought us all over, I found out I was undocumented. And that started just a slew of challenges that I had to overcome. And it's what made me want to become an entrepreneur, specifically focused on social entrepreneurship and giving back and doing good. And for me, it's focused on women that live in fear. My company is called Drool For Good. The initial vision was to reinvent self-defense tools and make a better wearable safety solution to help women live their lives boldly. And we just shifted to focus on workplace safety as a result of the 58% of women housekeepers that experience sexual harassment in the workplace.
That was a very good introduction, very detailed. I'm Mo. I'm from Egypt. I came here 8 years ago. 15 years ago, I built a modular home biodigester. It's something you can put in your home and it will produce fuel. It's a very fascinating idea. It was the most efficient biodigester designed at that time. It still is comparable to home matrix. From a fundamental standpoint, I'm very inspired by the idea of making homes more efficient through sustainable products. And that's why we started Tran 3 years ago with the idea of bringing products and services to the home to help users get access to smart, sustainable, and healthy water. Where I'm from in Egypt, water used to be a very common thing. It's not as common anymore. And it continues to be a growing pain. So is here. And my very first boss, I used to work at the World Bank as a researcher before, and he would constantly tell me that we would see various fluctuations in prices and quality. We all see that today. And in result, our fundamental goal is to fix that through modular products and services in the home, and that's what we do.
My name is Andrew Zeltner. I'm a senior immigration attorney at Clasco Immigration Law Partners right here in Philadelphia. My practice concentrates on representing all sorts of companies and securing work authorization for people like Mo, great people like Mo, to be able to lawfully work in the United States. As you may have heard, immigration is somewhat in the news these days. And we're dealing with an administration that I would not exactly call friendly to legal immigration. I think the deportation and asylum issues suck up the bulk of media attention, and in a way rightfully so. But there's really been what I call an invisible wall put up with regards to high-skilled immigration, and this administration's approach has been to do everything and anything that it can to delay and deny the ability of individuals to obtain work authorization in the United States. So that's the fight that I'm engaged in on a daily basis, and I've become much grayer over the last 2 years for it.
Well, it sucks to go last after all these incredible speakers, but my name is Tran. I'm the current CEO of Penji, Waterfront Ventures, and Owners Magazine. And despite the fact that they're all very different companies, our collective goal is one unified mission, and that is essentially, we believe that in order to help underserved communities, it's the students that we have to keep within the community. Because when you imagine a city that's growing and students begin to leave the city to migrate to San Francisco, New York, or cities where there are more job prospects for them, the ones that are left behind are often the parents, the grandparents, and the people who don't exactly have the know-how or the resources to fight gentrification or alone fend for themselves. So what we try to do collectively as several organizations is essentially build programs and incentives to keep companies in the city and also attract new startups, specifically tech startups, to come to and give underserved communities a chance. So that way they will give tech jobs to the students that are there. Subsequently, that will keep the students there. And when the students stay, they help pay the rent. They help, beautify the community. And the money stays within that community. And overall, just having students stay within any community, that draws retail. It draws so much more to that community. And that's what we believe is the best way to preserve communities. So essentially, that's what I do.
Great, thank you all so much. So before we dive in, I would love for us to get a sense of who's in the crowd and who we're talking with today. So if you could bear with me. If you are if you consider yourself to be an entrepreneur, would you raise your hand? All right, we got a few. An investor. Couple. A supporter of entrepreneurs in some way or capacity. Great. And are you just here to learn? Love World Affairs Council. Everybody. Yeah, that's what it should be. Cool. So to kick things off, and everyone don't feel compelled to answer every question. If you feel really strongly, please jump in. But if you want to give other people their time, that's totally okay as well. There are a few that I might ask everyone to answer. I'll reach out to one of you specifically. But to kick things off, how has your global perspective and background as an immigrant influenced the way that you've built your company or the company that you've built? Yeah.
So I came from the country of Vietnam since I was 5 years old. And my family, I'll just admit to you guys, we were never wealthy. We grew up very poor. And I didn't even know we were poor until somebody told us that we were poor. Because Vietnam was a very poor country. And so when we came here, we lived in Camden, which is one of the poorest cities in America. But to us, it was actually a major upgrade because we had what was called a job, which was a foreign thing. It's funny now, but back then in 1994, that was a foreign concept to us. In Vietnam, it is common to die of starvation and hunger. It is common for children and families to not make it past the age of 7 because they die of dysentery diseases. And so the fact that my grandparents had jobs that pay on a consistent basis, that was groundbreaking for us. So we thought we were actually wealthy. But then, of course, somebody told us we weren't. Now, coming from that particular background, I grew up not understanding hierarchical structure. In America, we have a very specific hierarchy to everything. You know, whether it's the food chain, whether it's, hierarchies, Maslow of needs, or the corporate work structure, there's always hierarchies. And that was something that was very foreign to me. So when it came to actually building a company, I didn't know that I had to build a hierarchy, where I had to build a chain of command, where, okay, I'm the CEO, managers, executive managers, all the shenanigans. We're a small company of about 45 staff members so far, but we don't actually operate that way. The way that we operate is via a team dynamics, and I'm sure 3 of my team members are here, or one of my co-founder can attest that we, for the longest time, we call each other team members. We never call each other employees and employers. And the word boss or CEO was very rarely thrown around because that was not a concept we were actually familiar with. So as a result of my specific upbringing, we built a company that didn't have a lot of barriers between communication. And it was so easy to speak to one another, to just talk. You know, we're just humans. We're all working towards the same exact goal. We never had this hierarchical structure that would separate classes, separate, departments, separate, positions. That was something that we just never had. So that was how I built my company.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say for me, it was really the decade I spent undocumented that really framed my entrepreneurship career. So when we came over, my dad was an engineer. And as common with a lot of immigrants, he was stripped of that degree, didn't count here. And he ended up having to swallow his pride, borrow some money, and he bought a 7-Eleven franchise, which became a family business. And he really lost a sense of his identity. And looking back, I think he was a shell of himself because he thought that job was beneath him. He lost a big part of his identity. And when I turned 15 and learned I was undocumented, it was a complete shock because the government brought me over. So I thought I was like everyone else. But what it meant was that I couldn't apply for college. I couldn't get a driver's permit. I couldn't get a loan. I couldn't do the simple things that we all in this room take for granted. And it meant that I spent a lot of time working under the table trying to be invisible. I didn't want people to know of my status. I didn't trust people. I didn't share my story with people. I was really worried that if someone found out, and this is so naive, but as a kid, I thought if I told someone and they got mad at me, they would go report me to ICE and I would get deported and I would be sent to a country that I felt no affinity to while I was desperately trying to stay in this country. And the experiences that I had undocumented were not pleasant. As with many undocumented people, you're being exploited for your work. I worked in the restaurant industry. I worked at dry cleaners. I worked, my whole family, we worked at delis, gas stations, anyone that would give us work. And the norm was we made $5 an hour. We were always on call. We really had no rights whatsoever. And for me, I experienced a lot of sexual harassment. And it would always start off in, little comments here and there, but it would eventually lead to me having to leave the position and look for other work. And the industry was so small, everybody would talk to each other, and I would be basically blacklisted. And I still remember one manager at a restaurant that had 2 weeks' pay cash in an envelope that was taunting me with it, saying, if you give me a kiss, I'll give you your pay. And it was very commonplace at that restaurant that if you went along with the manager, what they wanted, you got the shifts you wanted. But if you didn't, you just got written off the schedule. So all those experiences really shaped me in wanting to become an entrepreneur, and especially in what we're doing now. Because the two things that changed my life was my mom storming down to the local community college, demanding to see the president, sharing our life story, and refusing to leave until they let me enroll in school. My mom is amazing. She basically told the president, call the police if you have to. I'm not leaving. It's not my daughter's fault what happened. Let her enroll. This is the only thing that's going to give her opportunity. And because I was able to go to community college, I could transfer to Temple. And they assumed I was documented because I had my associate's degree. And every time they would ask, I'd just be like, oh, my social security number. Yes. I'm going to get that to you. Just give me some time. I forgot. And I would just avoid the admissions office. But then the day I became an American citizen was April 19th, 2012 at 10:39 a.m. Thank you. And I celebrate that day. To me, that's my Americaversary, because That day, for the first time, I felt like a human being. Like I felt free. I felt like I was unshackled by my circumstances and I could do what the fuck I wanted to do. Oh, excuse my language. Not what I had to do. And ever since then, I felt like, okay, I finally have a voice. I got to do something with this. And with the business that we're working on now, these 58% of housekeepers are women of color, immigrants. If they're undocumented, it adds another layer of complexity. And because of their low status, their low position, they are exploited and they experience an obscene amount of sexual harassment, either from guests, from contractors, or management. And they're groped in their room, they're solicited for sex acts. Every day they go to work, they put themselves at risk. And what we've done is we've developed technology that with a press of the button, it can triangulate their location inside of buildings and immediately get help so that they feel empowered and they no longer feel afraid not knowing what's on the other side of the door when they open it. That was a long answer. I'll stop with the long answer.
I'm sorry. Can I give a round of applause to your mom? Holy crap.
So what was the question?
You got so in tune with her story. How has your global perspective or immigrant background influenced the company that you built?
Yeah, as mentioned, I'm from Egypt. I didn't live in Egypt my whole life, though. I lived in England. I went back to Egypt when I was older, and at that time, the H1N1 virus was going, and I remember, like in England, oh, it's not really a big of a problem, and then you go to Egypt, and that's all what you can talk. That's all what everyone can talk about, and it was fundamentally around the whole idea of terrible waste management. I went from living in a place where no one would talk about viruses to this extent, to people that are scared for their lives outside of my house. That was a crazy experience. I still do not fully forget it, but from a fundamental standpoint, it was a big drive to think about these problems from a different standpoint and to think about them on a bigger standpoint. At that time, I've always been very fascinated by Apple as a company as well, and I wasn't as fascinated as I was when I went back to Egypt on an older age, because someone can be dying because of a virus, but they're able to pick up a phone and call 3-4 miles away. And it's in my head, it's like the phone you're holding holds so much more technology than anything you need to be able to manage this waste you can perfectly manage this waste through half of that technology. It drove a deep thing in my head of where there are many things that in this world are not done well, and only when capitalism is used well can it produce things that phenomenally change consumer behavior in ways that we cannot contemplate in our heads. And that is beautiful about America. This is why, even though I love England, I did come here. I'm still here. I think it's an incredible thing because iPhones changed people everywhere more than many things, lots of things, lots and lots of things, lots of nonprofit, lots of other actions as well did not change the world as well as the iPhone did. And I hope to create something similar, if not better. I believe it will be better. That's what I think that's what I think is very special about here, and this is why I wake up energized every day, is that you can create something to change 6 billion people's lives forever, and you cannot go. There are copycats that can come, there are things that can come, but you have a unique opportunity to change consumer behavior in a way that can go back here and only here. As of now, you don't understand, but and that's an incredibly special thing.
That's a pretty good segue into my next question about why you're here, essentially. So they say that 90% of venture capital goes into 3 states, California, I think it's New York, and Massachusetts.
And Philadelphia, more generally, Pennsylvania is not on that list. And so it's harder to get capital to start a company here. But you all are here in Philadelphia. So what is it that this city is providing you that has helped you find success? And why are you choosing to build your company here? And Andrew, if you have clients who have chosen to build their companies here, I'd love to hear what you've heard from them as well.
I can start. I always have things to say. The reason I came here is not a very interesting story, but I stayed here. The one thing is where the capital is located doesn't matter. If someone wants to make money, they will wire transfer you the money anywhere in the world. It matters where the figure, the 3 cities, no one cares. But so you get capital moving. Capital moves. The Goldman Sachs moves trillions of dollars a day. So the capital moves. So it doesn't matter where it's located. And there is, I think, Philly. We chose this because we were about to leave, but we did choose to stay here because of the fundamental opportunity that this has from a potential standpoint. So you have a city that's well located, good pricing. Good room, cheap real estate, but incredibly undervalued. Like an undervalued stock or an undervalued company, it's similar to that perspective. So I think Philly is extremely undervalued, and it can go far away in where it can be. It can be New York, and that's exciting for us at Tran.
I do a lot of work with the University City Science Center up on 36th and Market, and it's amazing how many companies are working there that are growing, doing really great things, and I think they're there for a lot of the reasons that Mo articulated, and I think the city is poised to, we're kind of stuck between that New York and DC area, but from a cost perspective, there's a lot to love about this city, and I would say that's really the number one factor that I see from the entrepreneurs that I represent is they see a cost effectiveness here that just doesn't exist in DC, where you're looking at housing prices and cost of living prices that are just much higher than what's the reality is here. So I think I completely agree. I think the city is primed to grow even further, and I see that from the companies that are at the Science Center that I deal with that are looking here perhaps because they don't like the tax structure in California, for example. So that's one thing that I hear all the time is that Pennsylvania, we can become even more competitive, but there's a definite difference between California and New York, and I think there's room for growth there.
Yeah, I think I saw a study on City Labs recently that states that Philadelphia, in terms of startup creation, it actually ranked top 10. Now it's number 10, so it's not like very high on the list. But in 2017, I believe the city invested overall VC funding was $629 million, which is actually quite a lot, for a city like Philadelphia. So overall, I don't think our numbers are actually anything to not speak highly of. I think that as a city, the city is actually doing very well. But I think what makes me and what makes a lot of entrepreneurs want to stay in the city doesn't have so much to do with the amenities or like the VC investment and all that, because it doesn't matter until you get the money, like it's somebody else get the money. That's not a big deal. But I agree with what you were saying, like regarding the cost of living. It's very affordable to actually live in the city of Philly compared to many other major cities. And the other one is quality of living. So it's not just the cost of living, but the quality of living your life here is substantially higher here than compared to Silicon Valley or San Fran Bay Area. And I think the last thing, which is often overlooked, is the fact that Philly, I think statistically, has proven that we have the highest retention of millennials out of any city in the country. Out of any city, the highest retention of millennials. Like, holy shit. I mean, Yasmin, like I'm backing you up with this profanity thing. Yeah. So we have the highest retention of millennials. And I think what that means essentially is that millennials, and I'm speaking about myself and those who are millennials here, we are the ones who currently have the loudest voice in terms of championing minorities and, women. And so as a result, Philadelphia, and this is not backed by data, but I do believe this for a fact, that we are one of the major cities that actually is the safest and most equitable for women and minorities to work in. So I think that is a major factor, especially if you're an immigrant. So, I mean, it's a great city.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna, just because it's a discussion, I just want to provide another perspective, which I agree with everything that everyone said. As someone who is fundraising currently, I will say, as attractive as these attributes are, the one thing about Philly and the East Coast in general is that the investments typically don't go to early stage type of companies. So I have been in business for almost 5 years. I just went through a pivot from B2C to B2B. I am fundraising currently. And I will say that the biggest pushback I get is traction. What's your valuation? Investors here want you to be much further along than investors elsewhere. So I do just want to just give the lay of the land. And if anyone's an investor, I'm looking for investment. Help her out. Thank you.
And Mo and Kai, I'm curious to hear from you if you don't feel that capital is a disadvantage that we have in Philadelphia. What are the challenges that you've encountered in growing your business here? Or just challenges in general, regardless of where it could have been?
I think you too much for this answer.
No. I would say the one thing is the opportunity. Like when I'm in San Francisco, you see lots of these events. I meet lots of people that are very, very interesting, and I have lots of fruitful conversations. Same as in New York, these networks lead to lots of things. I would go to New York for like 3 days, and they're usually all events. But that's something I do miss here, is that there isn't that opportunity to and I would also but he said that the millennial, this is the biggest city to retrain. Really? Oh, okay. Well, that is a very excellent point. We do see that talent is not as widely special talent, like really, really special talent that is like, there are maybe less than 1,000 of them around the world that you have that, but those are not millennials. I don't know who those are. They're usually older, but those sector of people that are very, very specific to something that you want to get done are harder to find here, and they're usually. But in other cities, there would usually be a handful of them waiting for an opportunity. So, and sometimes you find them here, but there's only one for the whole city, and it's like everyone's talking to the president, and so it's messy. But I think those very, very finite experiences that you need to do certain things are not as widely available here.
Thank you. Mo, I've been trying to get you to hire a VFA fellow for like 1.5 years now. I think that they might fit that criteria, the very specific criteria. I'm going to keep hounding them. So, Kai, you touched on diversity and the role that it can play, specifically here in Philadelphia. And I think a lot of people talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to tech and entrepreneurship specifically, because often we are lacking in that regard. So can you all tell us a specific way that you've incorporated DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion practices into your work or your company? And that could be through your hiring practices, the clients that you're serving, or if you want to take it a different route, could you share an area related to DEI where you thought that you were being inclusive and realized that you weren't and made an effort to address that?
No, absolutely. So I think it's essentially a two-part question in terms of what we believe in it and how we ultimately executed it. So I think to start off with, we actually don't believe in diversity and inclusion. Now, before you throw me out, and I could be wrong, but I do believe in specifically today's current climate. When you say diversity and inclusion and equity, for the most part, what you're really saying is race and gender. And I do believe that the word diversity is oftentimes used as a euphemism for race and gender. because it's very difficult to say that word without thinking of either one of those. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. But diversity, to me and to our company, encompasses so much more. It's diversity in your beliefs, diversity in your thinking, diversity in your socioeconomics, diversity in who you are, in age. I mean, there's so much. The word diversity is very encompassing. But I do believe that when we say it, we end up focusing on, I would say, the 1%, which is relevant in today's current political climate. And so we adopted a different word, which is acceptance. And so for us, right, and naturally I happen to be a Vietnamese immigrant, so it wasn't very difficult to build a diverse culture. But when we hire people, we have two philosophies, one of which is accepting people. And accepting people means we do what's called a discovery, where we try to get to know you. So the current hiring process, right, which I do encourage a lot of employers to completely scrap. If you don't know it already, your current hiring practice, the Q&A question, the phone interviews and whatnot, that was created during a time where diversity and inclusion was not important. It was not whatsoever. And so when you perpetuate that practice to today, that practice was what created the inequality we have today. And so what we did, the first thing we did was scrap that completely and recreate something that we believe was unique to us, something that we believe actually drives diversity and inclusion, or you know what, acceptance to us. And I mean, I'm not going to share it. That's going to go into a different conversation. But essentially, what we did was we asked people two questions, just two questions that matter the most to us. Number one is, what is your dream? Every employee that goes through Penji, we ask them, what is your dream? What do you want to do with your life? And of course, they need to have a good answer. If you can't answer that question, I'm sorry, we can't hire you. Like, we just simply can't hire somebody who doesn't have an ambition greater than us. We are not your dream at all. The second question that we ask is, once you answer that question, so let's say you want to be a world famous singer, right? The second question we ask is, how can we help you get there? Because in today's culture, you have to accept that you are not the final destination. We are not IBM. We are not Apple. We are not the last place you're going to be. And so it is important, and what we found to be very effective is that we understand that diversity really means accepting people for who they are and where they are, not because of the color of their skin. Because think of it this way, right? If you come into my company, right, and I'm hiring you because you are a gay, black, lesbian, for example, what am I really saying? The most valuable thing about you is the fact that you're black, you're gay, you're a lesbian or whatever. That is not the most valuable thing about you. Would you, if you were an individual in this audience right now, do you want your employer to value you for the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, or your competency? So the second thing that we value besides acceptance is competency. And we make that statement. That's actually one of the statements that I make, is that whether you're gay, transgender, the color of your skin doesn't exactly matter to us. Do not expect to be treated based on the color of your skin. You will be evaluated based on your competency in this company. And so I think, to answer that question in a very brief sense, is that we don't believe in diversity, we believe in acceptance, and we believe in competency. And we believe in giving people a chance where others wouldn't.
Thank you.
We at Clasco, I think, are the only medium-sized law firm that has been in the Philadelphia Business Journal's best places to work for 3 years in a row. So we're proud of that. My paralegal staff, I like to say, is a lot like the United Nations. I mean, I have paralegals from all over, and what I find works best for us is passion. I need, folks working for us that are passionate about what they do and passionate about helping immigrants, and that's what I try to find. When I'm interviewing, I kind of throw out the regular, interview questions and kind of say, what do you think we sell here? And sometimes people will say, well, I think you sell, visas and or status. Well, no, I mean, that's the outcome to it, but we don't sell that. What we really sell is peace of mind, right? We sell peace of mind that your matter is going to be handled competently. You're going to be able to work in the U.S. and live in the U.S. and raise your family and meet your goals. And if you're not passionate about that, then you're not worth having in our office. I mean, when I hear you talk about the day that you became a citizen and you know it down to the date and to the time, That's what, that never gets old for me, ever, ever, ever. And it never will. After 17 years, I still get, goosebumps when I have those moments as a lawyer. I had an asylum case from a Syrian applicant where the government wouldn't give us an answer for 3 years. And they said, your client is a security risk. And we filed a lawsuit, and I said to the U.S. attorney, what do you mean the client's a security risk for 3 years? She's living in Pennsylvania. Are you really going to tell that to a judge that she's a security risk? And ultimately, they settled the case with us. They approved the application, and I broke down in my office, and I said, why is this happening? You've been doing this for 17 years. You're a veteran. Why is this why are you reacting this way? But it's still, so powerful to me, and that's what I look for in people. I'm not so much interested in race or any of that, although I think diversity matters and a variety of opinions matter. But I'm looking for the passion to ooze out of you. I want people who are in the fight with me, every single day, and have those kind of emotional connections, because that's what it's about.
Thank you.
I would talk. I think immigrants don't. We don't have that either. I like your answer a lot, but we don't have those two questions either. I don't like that. But I do. This is. I don't think I was in this case before a few times, but immigrants don't want empathy. Anyone that wants to provide as an employer empathy, I think that's useless. But I think that right now, if you just treat talent where you see it well, and people that are the most talented, we accept the most talented person. We will always do that. But 50% of our full-time employees are women, and but we did not look for them. They applied, and they were the most talented individuals, and they're the most talented people within their sectors, and that's why they're here. But I don't think there should ever. I think it's completely wrong and foolish to have like an internal, like, I'm looking for black, I'm looking for brown, I'm looking for this. That's I think how people fail. But that's my perspective.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I'm involved with organizations that are all about diversifying male-dominated fields. So I started a chapter of, it was a coding organization to help women get into coding. And the idea was that a lot of girls are left out of that field. They're not introduced to it. They're not encouraged to pursue it around middle school. And this organization was to kind of take that gap and see how they can address it by providing a safe, empowering learning environment where women after high school or even college can look into whether or not they are interested in coding and learn about front-end development and whatever tech skills that they're interested in to pursue that field. And especially because in that field, there's less of a wage gap. And then I sit on the board of Coded by Kids, which is all about teaching inner city youth to learn how to code. I'm a big believer in the birth lottery, which is the whole idea of you don't choose your starting point, your race, your gender, your socioeconomic class, but yet it sets up the opportunities and circumstances that you have in your life. So in talking about equity, those organizations are all about providing access to those fields. And I do believe in diversity in the sense that the value is the different perspectives from different types of people. The fact that if you have people that come from different backgrounds and races and experiences, you are going to tackle a solution differently and a problem differently, and you're going to come up with better outcomes as a result. And because I have had the privilege of being involved with those organizations and access to that pipeline, I have not had a challenge in terms of having a team that's not diverse. So I'm very lucky in that regard. At the same time, I will say that at one point we were 15 people, and we were so diverse it actually caused clashes within the team, where we had people from all different ages and races and countries where they didn't understand, they didn't grasp the different identities and how they intersected, and it led to some challenges within the team. And we had to actually bring someone in and do a lot of inclusion training to break down those barriers that were there as a result so the team could relate to each other better and find more common ground.
That's really interesting. That's a perspective that I haven't often heard, but I'm sure is more common and is just not spoken about, I would think. So at Venture for America, we bring a class of anywhere from 170 to 200 young entrepreneurs together each year and set them off on their journeys. And a large portion of those young entrepreneurs are focused on social impact and social responsibility and social entrepreneurship. And each of your endeavors has a social leaning of sorts to it. And so in your perspective, what is the role that small businesses and startups can play in impacting our society at large? And both from the companies that you're building individually, which you spoke to a little bit about your journey and your perspective, but on a larger scale too, how else do you see smaller companies playing a role in social change?
Smaller companies that want to stay as small companies, or will they become big?
I mean, we would hope they would become big companies, I think.
Well, small companies that want to become big companies, because there are small companies that are fine as small companies, and that's fine too. I would just say the point I just said, which is you can change consumer behavior. That's if you understand that and what that fundamentally means. The computers look like a certain way because not because they never meant to look like this, but it's if you can change consumer behavior in a certain pattern and you're very determined to be able to do that in a fundamental way, then that's what I think from a social, because social, people always say, okay, let's make this bottle that's made from like this material, let's make this from this. But if it's always you're selling an item that is an item that people are getting it for certain reasons, but that isn't engraved in terms of understanding something on a deeper level and being able to use something on a different level, then I think it's just it's making it's an item. But I think the biggest social impacts you can ever do is over long periods of time changing user behaviors to improve.
I think to answer the question, because the question was more relevant, I believe, to how small business and startups can have a social impact on, the Philadelphia area. I think to answer that, we have to define exactly what social impact means, because the word social impact is a relatively new keyword that's surfaced lately, and it has a very different meaning depending on who you talk to. And from my experience, I've worked with a lot of nonprofits. I don't know how many, like almost 300 nonprofits. And what I learned is that social impact can mean one of two things. One is the organization or individual, they want to be the impact themselves. And number two is that they want to create an impact within a particular community for a particular demographic. The former is not the correct way or not the socially justified way. The latter, which I believe is the more, I guess you could say, the more correct approach to it, where you're trying to create an impact within the social fabric of your specific environment, not you trying to become the impact itself. So I think with that specific definition, it's very hard to determine who exactly or what exactly can be done about social impact, because it's a very complicated issue. And I think, and we've attempted this within the city of Camden, where we try to, do quite a number of things there. And what we learn is that for social impact to happen, it's not difficult, but for sustainable and measurable impact to happen over a course of, and I think as you mentioned, Mo, over a number of years, because impact happening today is not going to mean much if things are going to go back to the way they were next year. So for sustainable social impact, I think that's going to require the collaboration between the small business, the startups, the major companies that are in the city, the institutions that are in the city who benefits from, the social impact that's happening, and also the local government. So I do think it's going to require a collaboration and union between all four branches that are in the city. That's my belief on social impact.
And I would just say I think we're losing a little bit of our social impact too. One of the things that I do, very often is speak to college students and graduate students. And what I'm seeing more now than I've ever seen before is a willingness to say, I'm going to start my business in Canada. I'm going to start my business in the UK. I'm going to start my business in Australia. I'm voting with my feet. So it's literally, heartbreaking to me because I'll be out at Wharton or at Princeton and, this is the feedback that I'm getting, right? I don't know if I'll be able to get an H-1B visa. I know that there's only 85,000 of them available and, this year there were 200,000 applications, right? And the odds are not in my favor. So I don't want to live with a gun to my head, knowing whether I'm going to be able to sustain this business that's going to have any impact. And I think that's something from a policy perspective that we have to address that we're failing on miserably right now.
I think that is so heartbreaking that that's happening, and I'm finding it too because I speak around the country, and I used to have students that would come up to me and say, "Oh, I'm so happy to be here as well. I feel so lucky that I'm in the USA." And recently it's shifted to, yeah, I'm becoming a lawyer, I'm becoming a doctor, but as soon as I get that degree, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm going back to my country.
I see it more than I've ever have, and it is heartbreaking.
Same here. Yeah, it really is. I was going to say something else, but now I don't remember what it was. So what I will say, though, is if you've never been to a naturalization ceremony where you become an American citizen, I highly recommend it. It is open to the public. There is this sense of affinity that's very difficult for me to describe. There's this magical moment that I really don't have the words for, but I highly recommend everyone, especially if you're an American citizen, to see how you can partake in that, to really get the essence of the meaning that it has for those that were not handed that citizenship that many of us have.
And I don't think he'd mind, but I just saw Facebook photos from the director of the Pennsylvania Ballet, who I represented, who's now a U.S. citizen. And looking at those photos of him at his Nat ceremony was just spectacular. And I had a great hand in that and got to go to his interview. And it's the greatest feeling one can have.
That's wonderful. That ties really well into the last question that I have for you all. We've got about 10 minutes before we're leaving time for the audience to ask questions. So based off of what you've experienced or what you've seen from others, how can we as a community of entrepreneurs, investors, community supporters best support immigrant entrepreneurs in Philadelphia?
Give us money? No, I will say, okay, so I've been here for 28 years, but I feel like the thing that we normally don't have as immigrants is that, like, the network, knowing the right people, having that established, those roots. And I am finding it challenging to fundraise in the Philly area, and I really should look beyond. But if you really believe in someone's ideas and you have money, give it to us. I promise we'll do good things. I'm very self-serving. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But it's for the greater good. I'm not sorry.
I would say that this is a very interesting thing you said. I would say that people that think like that, I'm not a citizen yet. I would say
We have to talk later.
But I have been to one of those ceremonies. It is beautiful, but it was not mine. But I do think the people that do think like this, giving them an idea that they should stay here, because there are many reasons why you should stay here. I think anything that's happening with immigration will get better, and if it doesn't get better, the whole planet is screwed, so that's beyond us. But so it doesn't really matter if it gets worse. England is not going to help them. So getting that idea well spread out, and with immigrants that haven't started their business, giving them an idea that this is a great place and it is a lovely place to start your business, and with that comes a lot of opportunities. I think that's a beautiful thought.
I mean, I don't mean to be overly political, but I think the mantra of this organization, right, is democracy demands discourse. And I would absolutely echo that. For this administration took office in January of 2017. There hasn't been one law that they've changed with regards to immigration or one important regulation that they've implemented. Nothing. What do they have control of? They have control of the agency that makes the decisions. And that's really what has mattered over the last 2 years. So who we place in these, what administration we vote in, and the people that they nominate to run the agencies has just as an incredible importance on where policy is going to go, and whether we're going to have welcoming immigration policies, or whether we're going to continue down the road that we're on for another 4 years. We just had the Secretary of Homeland Security resign, the head of Customs and Border Protection resign, and the rumor is that the head of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services and the General Counsel of USCIS is on the way out. Why? Because they weren't deemed tough enough, by the administration. So, in a year and a half, we all get a vote, through our discourse to have a decision to change that, and that's something that we all need to take seriously.
I don't think there's anything specific we have to act on or do for immigrants, because I do think it's a natural tendency for immigrants to come to a new country and strive very hard for themselves. I mean, myself being an immigrant and my family being immigrants, we never really, when we came here, I still remember there was a very specific program. I forgot what it was, but it was a school program that I was in 3rd grade. And there was a school program, and the teacher gave me a little pamphlet, a little sheet of paper. Oh, it was a music class. It was because we couldn't afford the music class. And I wanted to learn violin, but it would cost money. And so the teacher gave me some kind of sheet that would say that if I claimed to be an immigrant or poor or whatever, or I forgot the terminology, but my uncle read it. And I remember he looked at it, and I was so sure that he would sign the paper and give me $70 to sign up, And he read it, and he was so angry. His face was red, and he was so mad. He ripped it apart, and he said, "You're not taking this class." And it didn't occur to me why until many years later that, again, I didn't know we were poor. But the thing is that when you're poor, what you don't want, or when you're an immigrant, what you don't want is people pointing it out. When you're an immigrant who is working hard in the country for a living, you just want to continue working. All you want, what you really want, is an opportunity. You don't want a handout. You don't need welfare. You don't need people to, make special exceptions for you. You actually don't need that. So if you think that we need that, we actually don't. My family, we're not prideful. We're just a hardworking family who are willing to work. And I think, Yasmin, you mentioned it. Yeah, my grandparents actually worked for $5 an hour at a chicken factory. We want a job, and we want an opportunity. And what we especially want is for people to not look down on us, because you have no idea the effect it has when you look down on a child or a family and you think of them as poor. So I think essentially what we really want is just decency and respect. That's all we really want. We don't need help. We don't need money. We don't need special permissions or privilege. We will find that ourselves. And, I'm going to proudly say that I'm from a very poor immigrant family, and we worked our ass off, and I worked my ass off. We did not have a good time. I did not have a great time. But you know what? We're proud of it. So if you are looking to help, just give us respect and, allow us to preserve whatever dignity that we have.
This could not be said better. This is
My man, Mo.
I think if I could add to that just a little bit, because I enjoyed that as well. I think the only thing I would add is I do feel like we are classified as the other, and we are made to feel like the other in many ways, and all we want is what human beings want, which is a sense of belonging. And I feel like for me personally, I got a sense of that when I became an American citizen, because for me I was like, oh my goodness, you can't kick me out now. I'm fucking legal, bitch, But I feel like where it really hit home for me was Philadelphia Magazine sent me an email naming me one of the top 20 citizens, whatever, I don't remember. One of the top 20 best Philadelphians or something like that. And I remember seeing the email and tearing up and realizing it wasn't that they called me best, it was that they called me in Philadelphia. Like I just wanted that sense of belonging. And I started crying like a baby, and I don't cry. So it really, really meant a lot to me. And I hear what you're saying in terms of like earning our own way. I think at the same time, if we are given access, because we do face so many hardships, there are so many more challenges that we have to endure as a result of our status in being the other, is that if there is a dignified way to provide access that doesn't make us feel less than, or doesn't make it feel like a handout, I do feel like we should fucking jump on that shit.
Yeah.
I'll stop. No more wine. Just cut off.
Awesome. Anything else?
All right, audience, it's your turn. We've got about 20 minutes for audience Q&A. So do any of you have questions for our wonderful panelists? And Haley, am I passing this mic around? Okay, awesome. I can repeat it if you all need me to. Just let me know. Yes, gentleman in the burgundy.
Hey, I'm Bill Wickard. I work for the airport, so technically for the city. And the first thing I want to say is I have never looked down on any of you. I look up to all of you. So just what you've done, what you've gone through, universally amazing. So Mo, your business really tends to reflect really what you've done in Egypt more than kind of here. But what have each of you done or looked at from, whether it's Vietnam, Kuwait, like, are you looking back towards your kind of ethnic roots as an opportunity to grow your businesses? Or are you really focusing from now and going forward on really just here?
Well, that's an excellent question. I would say actually, I worked at the water department here for a year, and that's why I started the business. Fundamental, and again, I think here is a key way to change user behavior everywhere. I don't look at Egypt for opportunity. I look for the whole world as an opportunity, and this is why I think you come here. You come here not to look at one country, but to look at the world. Not even here. The U.S. is not big enough for it's about looking at the world view, and that's personally why I do.
I would say thank you for that. That's really nice of you. Tell your friends, especially if they voted a certain way. I would say last year I was born in Kuwait. I'm Palestinian. My family's Palestinian from both sides. And we actually moved to Kuwait as a result of the unrest that was happening there. And what was interesting is even though I was born in Kuwait, as a Palestinian, I was actually a second-class citizen there. So I wasn't given Kuwaiti citizenship. I don't consider myself Kuwaiti. I was actually given Jordanian citizenship. And for 30 years before I became an American, I had a citizenship, a passport to a country I've actually never been to as a result of everything that's going on there. But all that to say that last year, the Palestinian government actually invited me to go speak at an event that they were having, a tech conference, which I will say I have never felt more honored to speak in my homeland. And we started talking about what we could do there. Unfortunately, because of everything that's happening, there's not much right now, but I hope one day to be able to go back and do more because I feel like I've done so much here. I would love to be able to turn that around and do it for my people. And also, especially as an American, knowing that my taxes are going to actually hurting them in some ways. So.
Anybody else? Nope. All right. Next question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Dan. I work for Ernst & Young in their valuation group. I found each of your stories very inspiring, especially in the foundations and the aspirations of each of the startups. One of the things I wanted to hear a little bit more about were the risks associated with each of them, and specifically what factors, whether that be qualitative or quantitative, helped overcome the hurdles of those initial risks as you entered into each of these ventures.
You can tell you're an accountant. Very accounting question to ask. What's that it? Risks.
Well, for us, I can say that in terms of qualitative and quantitative, we experience both kinds of risk in numerous varieties. When we first started this, in terms of building this startup ecosystem in Camden, New Jersey, to draw startups into the city, it was unknown because we were going what was contrary to the model at the time, which was to for the local government to give tax incentives to major companies to come in, give jobs, and hopefully at some point, trickle-down economy works. But if we study history, we know that trickle-down economy never worked, ever. Not once in history has it ever worked. So it's not going to work. And so being a millennial myself and being somewhat young, I experienced both kinds of risk where we had to put down our own money. So with us, we are essentially a nonprofit, but we chose not to be a nonprofit because we didn't want any kind of red tapes or ties to the government or any organization funding us. I would rather work myself and fund everything myself than have any kind of red tapes that would censor what I would say and the kind of programs that I would put out. And so that gave us an advantage, but the risk was that it was our skin, it was our money. And if it doesn't work, it will fall on my face. And my reputation, my name, my money, you could say both qualitative and quantitative values were actually on the line. And so that was what we faced during the first year as Waterfront Ventures and Waterfront Lab. I guess just to summarize, long story short, 3 years later today, 2019, we've definitely overcome all those obstacles, especially the quantitative values. Hope that makes sense.
Well, I would say we have a very particular risk. So, last year we faced this, but then I realized that I just need to talk better, and then it would be fixed. So it's a simple thing to be fixed. We cause a lot of volatility for utilities, to say the least. It's you're thinking we define ourselves as utility 3.0. Where you have solar, you have batteries, you have modular water products. It's a new way of living in the home. Utility companies like the batteries now, and so the utilities don't like this utility 3.0 perspective because it's very alarming, but through a very complicated way, we can generate profits for utilities. So now they like us, and it's about talking to them in a proper way and not being making sure that they are calm. It plays a risk in causing too much fear in someone that you don't want to cause too much fear. You don't want them to be afraid. You actually, I remember I talked to you and you told me, tell what contaminants are in the water, and that was not really a good, kind of a good idea. But from a fundamental standpoint, we realized that we have to have a very personal relationship with a lot of utilities, and we do efforts right now to talk to them and help them understand things that they don't understand right now. And since then, it's been a much better relationship in different and various aspects. And we hope to continue that, but that is a personal thing that we went through.
I would only add and say, I think starting a company is synonymous. Startups are synonymous with risk. There's always risk, and it changes depending on the stage of your company. I will say, at least for me, and my immigrant journey, I have had to restart my life multiple times. So for me, losing everything, it's okay. I've been there, done that. I can do it again. So I feel like as a result, my risk tolerance is different. And I can't speak to everyone, but for me, I am willing to do whatever needs to get done because I feel like I've had to figure out ways to make it happen. And I've done it every single time. For us right now, one of the biggest risks that we face, especially with this pivot going from personal safety B2C to B2B hospitality, is our new business is really driven by legislation. So when the survey came out, about 58% of housekeepers experience sexual harassment. It was at the height of the Me Too movement. And as a result of that movement, legislation started to pass city by city requiring hotels to protect their staff. And part of it was giving them a panic button, which I invented 5 years ago. So if this legislation does go away, I do think that is a big risk for this business. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. If anything, it's shifting to become statewide. It's predicted to sweep the nation in the next 5 years. But everything, there's always risk. And it's figuring out, okay, is it kind of competition? Can Google and Apple do what you do? How are you going to be different? How are you going to differentiate yourself? Do you have enough money in the bank? Do people really want my product? Are they willing to pay for it? And I feel like our jobs are really just problem solving all day long.
Indeed, yes, that's absolutely true. And the problems of today are going to be different than tomorrow, always.
Right.
My name is Dominic Truelove. I'm one of the founders of Payload, and I have a question for Mr. Tran. Seeing as how you started kind of in Camden, I get the sense that you guys, I'm not sure if you founded your business in Camden or in Philadelphia. We're kind of in a similar situation where I'm actually a contractor from Norristown. I'm not from Norristown, but that's where we're based out of. And our headquarters are going to be actually not in the city of Philadelphia. Now, how can we attract talent to come and work for us, even though we're only a short train ride? How can we attract the top talent for a new startup to come work for a tech company that's not actually in these like kind of hit areas where we're trying to actually do what you said. We want to attract talent from maybe that area and kind of there's no reason why the kind of forgotten surrounding areas of these hubs, which have already kind of been developed, how can I try and attract talent and keep them there and maybe kind of help build that community which has kind of been forgotten.
I think that would largely depend on whether or not you have colleges or university or institutions around you. We were lucky in the sense that in Camden, we had Rutgers, Rowan, Camden County, and Cooper Hospital right around the corner. And so in terms of bringing talent, and I think I would say it just comes down to a matter of luck. Because I don't know if students would be willing to drive down to Norristown. Is more Norristown or Morristown? Norristown, gotcha. I'm not entirely sure, so I can't really answer precisely how you would solve that problem. But I would say that if there were local institutions around you, that would be the best place to start because that's where we started. And students in the universities are always looking for jobs, and especially the ones that are graduating, they come prepared with the talent. So I think that would be the best way to start.
And I think getting support from city council, from they should be able to help you with that because they want to, I'm sure, drive people there as well.
I have follow-up questions. And you also said how can you try and attract and use basically stand on your own 2 feet without kind of utilizing too many government programs, without trying to I don't know how to say it, but yes, involve city council and try and have a favorable not treatment, but I don't know, how can we you get them on our side without kind of exposing ourselves too much to I don't know grants and everything. I'm not really interested in any of that because I kind of just want to I don't know how to word it, but stand on our own 2 feet.
Gotcha.
I think that's a two-part question. The first part being that how were we able to do it without the grants? I can answer that in 3 words, which you're not going to like, which is I sold everything. So, yeah, during the first year, it was not fun, but sold my car. So we had to self-fund in very peculiar ways. We made it, luckily. And I think in the second ways, which is to how to get the local government involved, you say, was it? Numbers. So whatever you're doing, when you're pitching to them, whether it is to get funding or to have them pitch into your idea, it comes down to proof. So whatever pilot that you're running, if you don't have the numbers or the proof to back up that, if they were to basically think of them as investors, really, and you're pitching to investors because they want some kind of return of investment, but it's not always going to be money. In general cases, it could be job creations or it could be other metrics that you're not aware of. But for the most part, numbers. You need to prove some kind of numbers that you are worth something to them.
Anybody else? No ladies. You're right back. Oh,
Sorry, I'll defer.
okay. No, go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, hi, my name is Eliza Pollitt. I work for the city and I run our innovation strategy portfolio. So one of the things that I think Philadelphia really struggles with is kind of our brand and telling our story. And I appreciate the comment about how Pennsylvania is not kind of one of the top 3 states for investors, because I think that kind of piggybacking off of that, it's kind of a hard sell to think about why someone, especially kind of in the startup entrepreneur innovation space, should come to Philly. And I think our livability factor is undeniable and our cost of living is undeniable, which I understand that those are 2 big draws, but I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you guys have found really effective or impactful when you're really talking about the brand of Philadelphia, and kind of like in partnership with that, kind of what's been your experience with the perception of Philly when you've been kind of back in your, either back in additional communities, or back in your home countries. I mean, we found that people don't even know what Philly means, like outside of Philadelphia, it's really hard. So there's a question like buried in there somewhere, but just kind of like, if you could talk a little bit about that.
So I was in New York 2 weeks ago, and someone told me that Philly is the Detroit of the East Coast. They're like, "Oh, you're coming from Detroit." I never been to Detroit, but I was like, I need to go to Detroit now. I think the common thing is why are we not New York? Come here and make this New York. If I were you, this is what I would do. Because that's what people feel in New York, is that, oh, it's oversaturated. Everyone's focusing about the banking and so on and so forth. The startups in New York feel that the big industries there overshadow them, and that's the biggest selling point, is that here you can no one will overshadow you, and that's what's exciting to us, and I think exciting to other people.
I think we're still too much of a secret. Even my parents in northern New Jersey, who weren't really familiar with Philadelphia until I moved here about 5 years ago. I mean, that's just the truth. They don't have an understanding of the city. They don't appreciate, oh, you really have an amazing restaurant scene. This is a great city. I see why you like living here. Yes, right? I think it's getting that word out to a large degree is probably something that would really help.
I agree with that. And Wawa.
Absolutely, the meatballs are great.
No, but it's interesting that you say, I've heard that we're the redheaded stepchild of New York.
Right.
When I talk to people.
But I said you don't have to pay $3,500 a month to get an apartment here either. So.
But I do think it's just that people don't know enough of what we offer, and they have this one image in mind that we're not clean, that there's a lot of crime, and it's finding ways to dispel that image.
Gentleman in the back there, you've been very patient in the white
Thanks.
shirt. Yeah.
My name's Adam. I work for a partner of the World Affairs Council, the Museum of the American Revolution. So, a question for the moderator. I'm curious what made you choose the title for this event, and I guess what lessons you think our founders and the American Revolution can offer for tech entrepreneurs today.
Alas, I cannot take credit for the title. That was not my doing. But so I defer to who on the World Affairs Council. Haley, was it you? Do you want to take that one?
Sure. So I've always, and I think we have 3 entrepreneurs up here who are great examples of this, but I've always looked at Philadelphia as kind of this secret, but also the place where so many people do want to start their companies because the entry level's great, the quality of life here is great. We do have so many exciting communities and universities and hospitals, and it's a great place for young people to be here. So I kind of looked at it as, we are the original startup city. Like we've been this kind of like kept secret for such a long time, but so many people have done a lot of good work here. It's great to have these 3 panelists and also Andrew here, so to kind of talk a little bit about why they chose Philadelphia. So.
Haley, how much time do we have?
We have like 2 minutes.
Okay. I'm sorry. But maybe after, I'm sure they would be open to having conversations, of course. So I just want to close things out with a quick question for each of you. You've got 2 minutes, answer it briefly. But what is on the horizon for you in the next 6 months or your company? What's exciting? What's happening that we all should know about?
Not raising money.
Raising money.
Yeah, that's to me the biggest priority right now. I mean, I don't want to. I want to focus on the business, but we need to. So right now it's that and getting sales, getting into more hotels, and helping more people.
6 months.
Ish.
Well, we are very, very excited about a series of things. This Thursday, we're announcing our new user experience, which is going to revolve around the user's dashboard. So we're adding a whole series of functionality towards what users see throughout their dashboard, including testing for more things, requesting a plumber, getting added filtration, getting enhanced water. Through adding minerals to your water will be an option through the Tran dashboard. So we've really centralized, we've realized more and more that the users need a wide spectrum of things when it comes to water inside their home. So we've done lots of very exciting work in terms of making it very accessible to them and easy to them throughout their journey of being a Tran customer. So that is something we are very, very excited about, and we have allocated right now a good amount of funding that is going to go to provide hydration to schools in areas with bad quality water. We will be servicing them, providing them with filtration and everything they need, renewing their filters whenever you need. And one of the best parts of it in its fundamentals is that you will see that through your Tran dashboard who your service is getting donated to. And you will be able to donate independently within 8 months, not 6 months, but within 8 months, you'll be able to donate independently to the Tran Foundation and go directly to provide more people with sustainable, healthy water inside their schools. So I cannot be more excited about that. It's something incredible that I'm really looking forward to get on.
Over the next 6 months, I'll be working on fighting to help retain the startup visa, which the Trump administration has announced they want to get rid of, also known as the International Entrepreneur Rule, which we didn't get a great chance to talk tonight about, but that's something I think that's really important for the startup community to have a specific startup visa, which came out towards the end of the Obama administration. And we just won a nationwide preliminary injunction on the unlawful presence rule for F1 foreign students. The administration wanted to change the law to say essentially if there was a technical violation in any of your student statuses in the U.S. with regards to one of your I-20s, you would be deemed to have unlawful presence from the moment of that technical violation, instead of from when you were actually told by the Immigration Service you were accruing unlawful presence. So the ramifications for that could be, someone could be barred from the U.S. for 10 years if you have more than a year of unlawful presence. So we have stopped that nationwide, and that lawsuit will continue.
I want to give a shout out to thank you, Andrew, for you and your firm championing that. It's incredible work that they're doing. I'm not sure if we give enough appreciation to that, so give me one more round of applause to that. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah. We immigrants, we get it, for the next 6 months, and I do apologize, I'm going to have to pitch what we do a little bit. By no means am I trying to pitch to you guys, but what we do as a company is we offer unlimited, basically we offer on-demand graphic design service for a flat monthly rate, which makes it very affordable to get a business up and going for like a small nonprofit or startup or whatnot. In the next 6 months, what we plan to do is launch 2 programs with the hopes of jumpstarting, the social impact space. One of which is called PenG Unlimited, which is we're giving our service away to qualified nonprofits for $1 a month. And that's it, just $1 a month, and they get as much graphic design as they want. And so if you know any nonprofit, please refer them to PenG. There's no strings attached to it. The other one, now the reason why we're launching that is we realize that nonprofits, they want to get a lot of funding. But a lot of times what they don't have is a good branding, a good website, a good whatever, a good pitch deck to, submit to investors or whatnot. To get grants. And so we've been very successful with helping them get a lot more grants through our graphic design. And we're charging $1 a month. So we're pretty sure a lot of nonprofits can afford that. And the other one is called Startup Unlimited, which is we are trying to help startups that are entering the social impact space to get a head start. So if you know any startups that are, in the social impact space that are trying to help the underrepresented community, our program also gives them, not at $1 a month, but a highly discounted rate, so that way they can get their business up and going rather quickly. So that's what we're trying to do in order to help the greater Philadelphia community.
Thank you all so much for sharing.